Michael Bisping and Paul Felder call for O'Malley versus Sandhagen and criticize Sean for trying to get a rematch with Merab without going through another top contender. After Dvalishvili's first successful title defense against Umar, the elite of the bantamweight division saw their options of ascending to a title shot significantly change, as the fact that Merab won and he has beaten most of the potential contenders for the title in the near future naturally made things more difficult, including for O'Malley, who was dominated by Merab, and not many people are calling for the rematch to happen immediately. The only top contender who Merab hasn't yet beaten is Corey Sandhagen. The Sandman is coming off a loss to Umar, and he cannot wait to go on another winning streak to get closer to an opportunity of a title shot. Considering both of their fighting styles, Corey versus Sean almost guarantees a fan favorite fight, if the UFC does in fact match them up. But O'Malley doesn't seem to be interested. Bisping and Felder share thoughts.
I've said that I'd love to see that fight before. That fight would be extremely exciting, and Corey's just sitting around waiting. Make that happen. And I agree with Corey that I don't think that fight makes sense for him to get a rematch with Merab. I think he needs to fight somebody else and prove himself again. And that fight is fun. It's another tall, rangy striker who brings the action every time he's in there. Make it happen. It makes sense. Sean needs to fight somebody, man. You can't just, these guys, they get to the peak, they get to the belt, and they sit around and it's like they just want to get right back there. And it's like, it just doesn't work like that, especially in a division. When you're in a division that's filled with studs and people that can be the next in line, it's hard to get right back in there.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Sean Strickland tried to do. Remember when he fought Dricus and lost to him the first time? And of course, he ended up fighting Paulo Costa. Listen, for Merab Dvalishvili, another rematch with Sean O'Malley would be great for him because he'd make money because Sean O'Malley is a draw. But that is a logical matchup if Corey Sandhagen isn't booked.
Israel Adesanya gives his final commentary before the fight with Imavov and talks about his approach to competing in this headliner, trying to explain why we should expect something much different from him this time than what we saw in his last two outings. His last two matchups involved fighters with whom he's had the most heated and personal rivalries, and he lost in both cases. Now, he's facing a fighter who's on his way up, and though there is no beef between them, this outing is not less, if not more, important for the former champ, as 3 losses in a row would be devastating, and the only way to reinsert himself as still a capable title contender is a victory here. Israel talked about reinventing himself and fixing what was necessary to get back on the right track after his loss to Strickland as well, and then he went on to lose to Du Plessis. When asked why this time is going to be different from his last 2 octagon appearances and what's his mindset for the Imavov fight, this is what the former champ said.
Yeah, for me, I just had to look at myself. Example, don't take things too personally. Like, none of these motherfuckers know you. So that was one thing I definitely came away with in my last 2 contests. And I just know how to approach the game now. Like, this fight's going to be a boring lead up for people because, there's no really beef between me and him. But I mean, next time I have beef with someone, I know how to approach that. I know how to handle that very well. I've done it in the past very, very well. Trust me, I have. You guys have seen. But the last 2, I didn't approach it very well. This is warfare. And if you look, I took 2 L's, so I pulled back and I'm okay, address what did I do wrong? And as a general, I addressed it and I was like, cool, I fucked up there. Okay, I could have done that better. And then that's how you get better. You have to really take a look at yourself and get better in all aspects. So yeah, I don't need to share that with everyone, but I know what I have done better this camp. A lot better this camp.
Islam Makhachev gets honest on Magomed Ankalaev's title shot against Alex Pereira and expresses frustration with certain decisions that Khabib made for UFC 311, which saw 2 of his teammates compete with him on the same card. Speaking with Russian reporters in Dagestan, Makhachev revealed that he was frustrated with Khabib kind of forcing it for the UFC to put Tagir and Umar on the same card as Islam, because it made the fight day much more nerve-wracking for him, and he wasn't even able to properly warm up before his fight with Moicano, because he was closely watching Merab versus Umar. But even more interestingly, the lightweight champion criticized Magomed Ankalaev for declining fights with Alex Pereira multiple times, and honestly assessing his chances against the Brazilian. First, here's what he said about Khabib and competing with his teammates on the same card. Quote, "I'm not going to accept fights that are on the same cards where my teammates are competing anymore." That was Khabib, who always pushed for this. "I'm standing there in the locker room, staring at the TV, while I must go out to compete for the next fight. And I'm not even warming up yet." Plus, every one of my cornermen, except for one, were with Umar, so I just warmed up somehow, watching Umar's fight. I don't need any of that anymore." End quote. And here's the part where he talks about Ankalaev when asked whether UFC was giving Pereira an advantage over Ankalaev by making the fight for the period during their Ramadan fasting. Quote, "I don't think they are giving Pereira an advantage purposefully. They're just not giving Ankalaev a freedom of choice. There are things that have made the UFC upset with Ankalaev, and rightfully so. I know that they offered him a title fight multiple times for different dates, and he turned all of them down. It's a championship fight, and for him, not one of those dates that were offered was appropriate. That's insane. So now they have given him an ultimatum. Either fight for the belt or goodbye. Of course, no Muslim would prefer to fight during Ramadan, as it's difficult to train and compete while fasting, but he has to do it now. And I think he has to be ready to the fullest for Pereira, because Alex is a true champion and has a decorated amateur and professional record. So it's going to be extremely difficult to beat him. I don't know if he can beat him, but be ready anyway." Chael Sonnen talks about the Jon Jones situation and what might the UFC be preparing for us at heavyweight next. The whole Tom Aspinall drama with Bones has gone pretty quiet for a while now, and if you pay attention to certain comments that Dana and Tom have made in this period when asked about the next heavyweight title fight, you'd have high hopes for this much anticipated heavyweight clash finally taking place sometime this year. Everything being quiet on that front, and most importantly, Aspinall not complaining on social media, is the most obvious indication of things trending in the right direction. It's certainly not a done deal, however, and it's not impossible UFC can surprise us with something different. Chael speculates on this point, saying that Jon will only be offered two options as it relates to his future in the company.
So are we seeing? Did we see a move here? Did we see a move that we're not familiar with? Is that why it went quiet? Or is that fight done? Now, what could get in the way of Jon and Tom? And there is something that could get in the way. Now, Jon Jones is not going to be offered two fights. Okay? He's only going to be offered Tom. The other option is walk. It will quite literally be, here's your fight or there is no fight. And that is true for right now. I mean, it wasn't but 4 weeks ago Pantoja was inviting Demetrius Johnson to come back, and we all love the idea.